everyone, and welcome to this breakfast. Thank you to all of you who rushed out the door, maybe passed the drop off to someone else, flew in from other places. I think there's awards that'll go for that. We're super excited to have you all here today, and we're really excited to have Josh here, who was in for another event, who he twisted his arm to come and spend some time with us. So thank you, Josh. We really appreciate you. This morning, what we're going to do is we're just going to have some nice breakfast. I'm going to set a little bit of a scene of really a lot about the research that Josh is talking about, but also the way that we're thinking about the world. And then Josh will get to walk you through some of the key concepts and the way that they believe the next kind of phase of our departments and the world is going to work. So this is a very sort of interactive, we kept it small for a reason. You don't get much time with you one-to-one like this. We're not on a big stage. So please do take the moment to ask questions, be curious, get to know around what Josh is thinking about in terms of his next phase of this research as well. So thank you and welcome. So this breakfast, we've really talked about re-engineering being the main thing. So for years, we've all talked about work design being something that is going to be really important. We believe that that is just the start of the journey. In this new workforce, we're going to be talking about re-engineering. And a lot of our content today and a lot of our topics will be really directly linked to what does it mean to build a new AI-powered workforce, or as you call the super worker organization. So a lot of that will be really hoping to get you thinking a little bit up. So we're not going to get into too much detail. This is going to take you to be curious and think a little bit differently. And it'll all be focused on really thinking about this in terms of how do we think about this new workforce DNA. So for those as well who don't know, my name's Siobhan Savage. I'm one of the founders and also the CEO of Reejig. My expertise lies in workforce optimization. So I've spent my career, kind of this feels like my market right now. You know, like everyone needs to be productive and velocity, they're all my kind of main things. But I've also spent the last 6 years building an actual AI company. So I have this really unique kind of sit in the middle skill and expertise set, which gives me a perspective that I don't think many other people in the world have done what I've done. So what I want to do is hopefully share some of what we see, some of the learning. Maybe you can package some of that up and maybe think about how you take this forward in your own workforce as well. We are in the midst of a once-in-a-generation change to work. We will never in our careers see anything like this ever again. And I think it is incredibly exciting. It's also super scary. And most folks, no matter what consultants will sell you, have not done this before. Everybody's new, right? And I think one of the most important things that we think about is when we're in this once-in-a-generation change to work, who do we want to be as leaders? And my ask of everyone in this room today is to really start thinking about being really bold. So start thinking about, how do we boldly reinvent our workforces? Because this is non-negotiable. Your CEOs, the train has already left. It's about how do you enable this? But also the role that you play is going to be critically important. How do you ensure that while you be bold, that you're also responsible and you don't leave folks behind? And that's one of the things that I spend a lot of time thinking about is how do we make sure that if we're going to run towards this AI moment, that you also think about how you do it in a way that folks are not impacted. And the question that we keep talking to everyone is are you ready? Where are you at? How do you feel about this? Is your workforce built for that new world? I personally built an agent. And that agent was designed to take every single Fortune 500 and any publicly available data that exists for any major company, took their shareholders' reports, their earnings reports. Basically, this is your CEO's message to market of what they're going to do over the next 3 to 5 years. And what we found was really interesting. Operational efficiency, AI, reskilling, digital, innovation, transformation, all were the kind of key highlights. And this was regardless of whether you're in manufacturing, in technology, for this once-in-a-moment time where everybody has exactly the same agenda on their radar. And we also know that CEOs are under a lot more pressure than what they've ever been before. So there's this sense of critical urgency to deliver this. It's not like a nice to have now. It's very much so thinking about it in terms of a non-negotiable mission critical. One of the things that excited us most when we read Josh's research was all about the super worker. And this super worker organization sounds like the most incredible place where I want a job. I'm also half cyborg right now.
You get to build one of your own.
I am. I mean, listen, I'm going to build $1 billion company with under 100 people. That's what I'm going to build, and I'm going to make sure
I wrote that
happens.
down. I'm going to track it.
Listen, this is on the record as well. But that's my vision, right? That organizations can be built in a completely different way. I have the luxury that I'm starting small. You are all massive companies. It's very different to go down to 100 people of what we're talking about. But really, this research was so inspiring because it really connected in the thing that we are seeing in market today. Your workforce DNA is now going to be made up of your full-time employees. It's going to have your flex workers, so think of your consultants, your contingent, your contractors. It's also going to have your digital workers. Now, no one knows where the digital workers actually sit right now, and it depends on what department, and they all fight for it. But really, forget about where they sit. You are responsible for designing an architecture, we call it the critical infrastructure, to enable this new workforce DNA. So it's something to really think about. It is all of the ways that your job architecture has been structured, the way that you've set up your systems, the way that you're looking at your processes, going to enable a world where you're going to have teams that are going to be made up of your full-time employees, maybe some folks in a marketplace or agile, but also your digital workers and some consultants and some plug-in resourcing. One of the things that we have learned on our journey, we started really early doors on the skills space. But as you start to think about work and think about redesigning this new world of work, what's going to be really important is to have this new toolkit. And this new toolkit is what we call the work ontology. And this work ontology is where you have people have skills. Jobs actually don't have skills. I know we've all sold to you over the last 10, 15 years in the skills-based organization that jobs have skills. And stop looking at me. This is an early Reejig skill customer who then evolved into work and tasks and skills. But people have skills, jobs have tasks, and what you require is the skill to complete those tasks. Now that sounds super obvious, but at the time it wasn't, because it wasn't possible with the way of doing data. And the way that machines were built, they weren't capable of looking at a whole workforce like that. Now in this AI new world, or the super worker organization, actually AI does not automate skills. AI automates the task. So this is going to be really critical for you to think about when you're looking at your structuring that new workforce DNA of your business. Some of the things that will be really important, and this is kind of like a segue into sort of what Josh is going to walk you through as well, is when you think about designing this new workforce DNA, you have to make work visible. No company in this room will have understanding of the work that's happening in your company. No matter who you are, whether you're in technology, in manufacturing, whether you're in healthcare, that work is not visible. And that is the biggest problem that we need to focus on solving, is how do we make work visible to enable you to make really strategic decisions on where you're thinking about AI. I also invite you all to think about, if you're in sort of the HR and a senior leader, how do you connect into the AI strategy? So we're seeing a lot of awesome HR folks who know that the AI strategy is happening and are looking to pair up with those teams, because you can't have your AI strategy disconnected from your people strategy. Looking at you, Ford. But this whole world where like it can't operate in silo. And most of the AI companies don't even know where to implement the AI themselves. So that shows you that there's this understanding gap that's missing. You also need to think about the AI, where is even worth implementing AI? You know, like there are some rules like completing a timesheet or tasks that like you do every so often. There's tasks that are costing you a whole pile of money that could be unlocked. It's about thinking about, based on the CEO and where we're going as an organization, where do you even spend effort and time? So having that work intelligence to really help inform the AI strategy so that you guys become really the educator to the business on where is the best place to think about work. Most AI teams will only ever think about using AI in software engineering or in product roles because it's what they understand. They don't understand work outside of that team. They don't know about logistics, they don't know about procurement. Your role is to help them unlock that part of the business, whereas all the opportunity is actually existing. And finally, the re-engineering part. You know, when you think about, and I'm not going to get into this too much because I don't want to steal Josh's thunder, but when you think about, you're going to do work design in phase one, but then the actual effort level that's going to be required from you all is this continuous re-engineering of work. You are not going to take out a task and complete your transformation. This is a forever ongoing transformation that's going to happen. So your new word should be re-engineering, not work redesign, because that's a static, once-in-a-lifetime redesign our job architecture. What you need to become expert on is re-engineering.
Oh, okay, so you guys.
So, without further ado, Josh, I would love you to come up and
Sure.
share some of your research and some of your thoughts around where you are. Josh does not need any introduction, but a massive round of applause for Josh.
Well,
joining us
thank
for
you.
breakfast.
Thank you, Siobhan. Okay, let's see. Where do we start? Okay, so I think so I've had the maybe luxury of being in sales, marketing, business development, product management, engineering. I've run a company. I've done financial stuff. So I've seen a lot of different jobs in different parts of companies. It's all the same everywhere. There's a product or an offering or a service you're trying to deliver, and there's a whole bunch of things that have to get done to do this thing. And what happened sometime in the past, long before I was born, somebody decided that the way to set this up was to have job families. And so we said, right? I don't know who dreamed it up. I mean, can you figure? I don't know who. Maybe it was Thomas Edison or somebody, or maybe it was, I don't know. Maybe it was the auto industry. I'm not sure where it started. Right? So we created these hierarchies of families in these functional areas with levels, by the way, because everybody wants to and we need, so we have operational first line workers, and then we have supervisors, and then we have managers and directors and so forth. And when I got into HR 25 years ago, everybody was all glued into that, and we talked about 9-box grids and succession management and forced ranking, you guys, and a lot of this stuff. And we are still left with that, right? You all have this. You have it in your HCM system, you have it in your pay systems, you have it in your promotion, you have it in your hiring, you have it in your recruiting. People's careers are based on this. And then, of course, along came the internet and all these other disruptional things, and now people started switching around from companies to companies, and all these job families. 40% of the people who changed jobs during the pandemic changed industries, not just jobs. They changed industries and they changed roles. So the idea of a job and a hierarchy and just doesn't work anymore. So along comes somebody who wrote this white paper called the Skills-Based Organization. I don't know who that person is, but maybe it was somebody at Deloitte when I was there. And everybody in HR said, oh, all right, that's the answer. We're going to everything's going to be skills-based. So let's build skills taxonomies, let's build skills inference, let's build AI, skills recruiting. And this job stuff will just sort of come along for the ride, right? And sure enough, what we found, and certainly I found this with most of the clients, is it didn't really work very well because we weren't thinking about the business problems. We were thinking about skills as if it was a solution in and of itself. We were chasing a solution, not a problem. And along comes AI. So now all of these fascinating ideas about dynamic work and people changing roles and people having T-shaped careers where you're broad in some areas and deep in others. People having, what I call full stack jobs, like full stack engineers, full stack HR, full stack marketing. I mean, that's kind of my life. My life has been becoming full stack more and more as I get older. We can just use skills for all of that. And people realized that, a lot of the technology to do that wasn't really working either. So what's been going on is we've been sort of trying to make our companies more and more and more adaptable to change. Because as Siobhan just showed you, and you can see this, I mean, right this minute, the stock market's probably crashing again today. I'm not even sure. I'm sure your CEOs are sitting around thinking, now what are we going to do with the latest tariff thing that just hit today? And maybe we're going to go back to Mexico. Maybe we're not going to go back to Mexico. We're just talking about this with Ford here. So we've got to find a way, and this is what CEOs are asking CHROs to do. Help me make my company more dynamic. Help me make it more responsive. Help me make it more accountable. Help me drive greater levels of skill talent density, which is really productivity per person. And of course, in the middle of all that, we have Elon Musk setting a great example and saying, I got rid of 80% of the people at Twitter and it's a better company. And CEOs are seeing that, and they're saying, well, how come can we get rid of 80% of our people? I know you guys are hearing this. It's just coming in different CEOs have different ways of expressing it. And we're sitting here in HR thinking, this is not that simple. It's not as simple as you think, just laying off a whole bunch of people and giving a bunch of people new training and new jobs. So that's where we are. So what I've learned, and the way I think about this, you guys can't see this, but I'll just walk you through it. I've been doing this long enough that everything seems like it's happening really fast, but it's not, because the organizations take time to adapt. A lot of these old systems, you're not going to throw them out. You're not going to throw out SAP. You're not going to throw out Workday. You're not going to throw out these old HR systems. It's going to take a decade or more for the vendor market to reinvent all that stuff. So we're going to go through it in stages. And what I've sort of discovered, and when I wrote the Superworker report, what I was trying to do, and I think it was the right idea, is to just convince people that this isn't about eliminating jobs, eliminating human beings, and disrespecting the people that you have. And that's, to me, my problem with Doge. Somebody asked me yesterday at a speech I was giving about what I would do with Doge, and I said, the one thing I would not do is I would not blame the people in the government for the problem. Because every one of them are trying to do the best they possibly can. It's the system that's the problem, it's not the people. So that was the idea of the Superworker, is can you empower and develop and support and reskill and redeploy the people so that they can do 2 or 3 times as much output per person and grow your company in the same manner and direction that you've been growing it in the past. And I think that's what's going to happen with AI. I mean, I don't believe we're going to end up with tiny, tiny companies. I think we're still going to have a lot of people. They're just going to be doing higher level stuff. So that's kind of the story. Now, because this takes time, the other part that I think is affecting all of you guys is we're kind of going through 4 stages at once. The first stage is the co-pilot, like Microsoft, or like what we built with Galileo, where you get your hands on ChatGPT or Claude or wherever it is that you're allowed to, or the one at Ford that they have internally built, or a lot of companies have their own LLMs. And you're doing the same job. You're a recruiter, or you're a business partner, or you're a tech person, or you're an analyst. And you stick your data in there and you're like, oh my God, my employee engagement survey, I can analyze it in 5 minutes instead of 5 hours. Or I just figured out something about this job candidate that I didn't realize would make them probably not a very good fit because the LLM just taught me something about their skills that I didn't see in their resume. And you're still doing the same job, and you're getting 10, 15, 20% productivity. And that's kind of what Microsoft's been sort of selling with the Copilot, is each individual person is going to be more productive doing the same thing they were before. And that happens, and then all of a sudden, you've got this sort of tool that you're becoming comfortable using, and you put more data into it, and now all of a sudden it's doing things for you. And it starts asking you questions. I mean, you guys have seen this with these LLMs. The more that they're trained, the more they seem to understand what you're trying to do, and they start taking stuff over. So if you're a software engineer, now apparently, 30, 40, 50% of the code is written by the GitHub Copilot, or 60, 70%. Okay, so you're still an engineer, but you've got this, it's not just an assistant, now it's sort of an automation tool to get things done faster. So we've done all sorts of scenarios in Galileo for things that you guys can do in HR. But you're still in the same job, same title, more or less the same pay. And then all of a sudden the LLM says, well, you're a software engineer and I'm writing code for you, but the requirements document that's been built over here doesn't seem to match up with the code that I'm writing. So maybe I ought to go back to this requirements thing, and me as an AI ought to be more involved in the requirements gathering so I can write code that's more relevant to the requirements. But that's not my job. That's this other guy's job. That's this marketing product manager's job, not this engineer's job. So the agent starts to do things that are cross-functional. I call this a cross-functional agent. And that's where you get into this issue of, well, what is the job? What is this engineer's job? And what is this product manager's job? And I think this is going to happen across all functions of business, in sales and marketing and engineering and HR and so forth. And when we were doing, and the reason this is so clear to me is when we were doing this research on systemic HR, and you guys, maybe a lot of you have probably seen this, HR is just as siloed as everything else. We've got a recruiter, a recruiting coordinator, we've got a sourcer, we've got somebody doing data, buying ads for recruiting, and they're all separate jobs, right? Well, they're actually a big chain of events that need to be strung together. So what I think is happening in AI, and this is going to take time, but it's going to happen, at an accelerating rate, is companies are starting to see these cross-functional integrations that we can do in these multifunctional agents. And then the people are going to be, and then we're going to have to say as an HR group, well, what happened to all these jobs we had? They're kind of irrelevant. We need to sort of start all over. And what I was talking to Siobhan about earlier this morning is, and that affects this thing we call the job architecture that I talked about in the beginning. So a lot of the work that I think we need to do, in HR is reformulate what is a more generalizable job architecture so that people can move to new roles and use the task-based tools that Reejig has and allow the AI to take things over and let the people add value on top of it. Because what I've learned, in my particular career is every company that automates something, they think they've created a competitive advantage by automating something, but then their competitors do the same thing. It's always the human value add that makes the company successful on top of whatever the technology may be. Now, in the early days of AI, it's going to feel like, we just need the AI and then we'll all be better off. But eventually, very soon, it's going to be what the people do on top of the AI that's going to really add value. So that's kind of where we are. I think, we've been working with Reejig now for a couple months. We've been getting to know them and interviewing you guys. I think what Siobhan's company is doing is really a fundamental sort of engineering part of this redevelopment of how we run our companies. And that is, looking at all these weird jobs we have and what these people are doing. I mean, we get a lot of clients that send us their job architecture, and you know what, it's just a mess. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. And I think the reason, by the way, one of the reasons I think we end up with these kind of brittle architectures is the way we do recruiting is we allow a manager who knows nothing about HR to design a job title and a job level and a job responsibility in a vacuum based on what they want to do, and then we stick it in the HCM system and we just created a new tree or branch into the job family that nobody thought about. And it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and more complicated. So I think for HR people, we've got lots of interesting architectural things to do, lots of re-engineering things to do, while these AI tools get smarter and smarter and smarter. I think the vendor market is really going to be disruptive. I mean, some of the vendors that are 10, 15 years old are going to get replaced by vendors that are 2 years old because ChatGPT is so powerful compared to the technology that companies had 10 years ago. And if you kind of keep reminding yourself of the sort of human capital values that you have in HR, I think we're going to be very instrumental in all these AI transformations. I think by the way, one of the things we've been talking about, Kathy and I are going to be talking about this tomorrow, is I think the CHRO role is going to be up-leveled again, not just to be a C-level business partner, but to be a transformation agent or a transformation leader to help the company understand what these organizational transformations mean to the individuals in the company. I mean, most business leaders don't think that way. I mean, they just think about let's bring this new tool in and replace these people with these people and so forth. So there's going to be a lot of really interesting, creative, strategic work for HR people to do. So that's my 10 minutes for the breakfast.
No, it's good. It's incredible.
Do you want to have questions, or do you want to eat, or what do you? Yeah.
Do you want to sit and just have questions?
I can stand up.
Be a bit more comfortable?
No, I don't mind. I'll stand up for a few minutes. Yeah.
Thank you, Josh.
Sure.
Appreciate it. This is a great program, great breakfast. Dan Vesa at GXO, one of the things that struck out to me when you said make work visible, what are some of the things that other organizations or even you guys are saying, recommending in terms of how do you make work visible, right? Because that's going to be one of the hardest challenges, right? We have job descriptions. We have, we do time series analysis and go and do like actual shadowing. But in this type of environment that we're seeing, making work visible is going to be the hardest thing. Because even as managers, sometimes we don't know until we speak to someone directly.
Well, there was a really good, yesterday I was at a conference and the CHRO of Seagate was there. And she said one of their mantras is, and I forget what the other two things were, three things she wants everybody to do, is tell somebody else what you're doing. Don't do it in a vacuum. Because organizations are not collections of individuals. They're collections of teams of people, right? I mean, we're not just all doing our own little thing inside of a company. It's the way we work together. So in order to create more visibility, you have to just spend more time talking to each other. When I went to Deloitte, I was really surprised at how there was, I think Deloitte's probably a little bit like McKinsey. There is no org chart. And if there was one, the next day it would be out of date. The only way you know what to do is to talk to a lot of people. And I thought I was wasting time going to meetings and conference calls, and I kept thinking, why are we having another conference call? And what I realized what I was doing is I was getting to know what everybody else was doing, so when a client issue came up, I could immediately figure out how to solve it because I knew what other people were doing. So some of this is better communication, transparency, storytelling, sharing. Like in our company, we're not very big, but twice a week we share all sorts of things that other people are doing, just to make sure everybody knows what other people are doing. And then issues of, well, why are you doing that? I'm already doing that. Or I just bought a tool to do that. Why are you buying a tool to do that? Why don't we use the one we already have? That just comes up, and you don't have to, kind of go through a big re-engineering project to do it.
I think I'll add to that. You get task data.
Yeah, and then Siobhan, and Reejig can help with that. Gloat actually has tools that create more transparency into gigs and projects and work, but it's a really good point.
Kira, I work on internal tech skills upskilling. So I laugh because I work on tech skills, but I feel like I talk about human skills a huge amount. You spoke of the future of jobs changing, things being more fluid. What's your advice on the capability building part around that? Because people like to be put somewhere. I say this kind of broadly. People have a tendency to feel comfortable when they're put in job titles. They can speak about themselves in a way that is my identity. I do X, I know X. It strikes me there's a huge mental and mindset change here. What's your perspective on how we navigate that as organizations?
I think it's a really big cultural top-down reward system that has to change. I think the company, and this probably has to come from the CEO, has to stop rewarding people for titles and levels and using those words publicly a lot, and and reward people for what they did, the contribution they made, the value they created to clients, and not the level or the role or the authority they have over other people. Now that's, a lot of executives were like, we did a project with Disney, and we looked at their senior executive titles. There's presidents, there's senior presidents, senior vice presidents, senior vice presidents. They just love their titles. And the CHRO said, we're doing away with all these stupid titles. You guys aren't going to get your own favorite titles anymore. So there's a lot of people that like that were born that way. But I think using language and reward around things you did and capabilities that you demonstrated, or people that you developed, or problems you solved, or teams that you led, will sort of diminish what your title is. I remember, I've written this up before, but I don't know how many companies did it. I interviewed a tech company a long time ago, and they were having these problems with all these software engineer, software test engineer, software quality test engineer, QA engineer, this engineer, that engineer, front-end engineer, back-end engineer, data engineer. And he said, and the guy was the head of engineering, he wasn't even an HR person. He said, everybody's now called engineer. We have engineers level 1, 2, 3. The 1 engineers are usually good at one functional area. The 2 engineers have these other skills. The 3, and he said, life's so much easier now. And nobody argues about their titles anymore because we don't have any more titles. So I don't know what it's like at McKinsey, but at Deloitte there were only 4 titles. You were an analyst, a consultant, a senior manager, or a partner. That was it. And then they added a bunch more later after I left, but but I think it's a problem, I know. And then on your resume, of course, when you put it on LinkedIn, you've got to not spend so much time on the title and talk about what you're good at. But that's the way. If I think about my career, I don't think anybody cares what my job titles were. It's what have I done? What have I learned? If you look back on your career, you would probably not tell people what your job titles are. You would say, I did this at this company, and then I accomplished this at this company. That is the real currency of a career to me. So it's definitely going to be an ongoing process. But
Yeah.
Hi, this is Angela from Citi, and I think the big challenge that we're constantly facing is the HR community aren't very tech-driven or data-driven to begin with. So we're talking about these very nice AI, and it used to be like big data, we're going to find out what's
Right,
wrong.
right.
And we have here people who can't use spreadsheet and then
Well, you don't need to use it. You stick it into Galileo and ask it questions.
We solved that problem.
I don't think there's, I have some sympathy for that, but not a lot. If you really don't like math, I'm not sure you should be in HR. I mean, you gotta be comfortable with data and numbers and you don't, we have, yesterday at this other meeting I was at, we do need to give AI literacy to everybody. I think a lot of people are afraid of AI. They're intimidated. They don't understand these terms. But that's a training problem, and I think most companies can build, pretty simple, good tools for people to get to know what it is. You don't have to know how to program it to use it. Yeah, so we do a lot of that in our company, and we're not asking everybody to understand how Galileo works, but when it doesn't give you the right answer, you don't just say, oh, it's broken. No, it's just that's the way it works. You have to ask it questions in the right way. And so we're going to have to just teach people to be unintimidated by this.
well, coming from an engineer and understanding the
Yeah.
perspective, it's the bigger community we have to preach to.
Yeah.
That needs to, so how do we
Yeah.
just get that message out there?
Things like this, like getting folks together, comfortable to share openly, because I think you're right. Like a lot of folks are, like, one, intimidated, like Josh said, but also like they're kind of rabbits in the headlight where they don't know even where to go.
But I think the magic of HR is that you're not just a data person. You're thinking about psychology, you're thinking about motivation, you're thinking about human issues, and you're not intimidated by the data. So I don't think this is a data job, no matter, there's pieces of it like Nick does, but it's a much more interesting, multifaceted career to me.
Also, I think like you're here, so you can be that evangelist and bring
Right.
the message out for yourself.
Great. Yelena, you had a question?
Yeah, Josh, thank you so much. It's always, so much to learn from you, just listening to your podcast, reading your articles, and having this opportunity. I guess one aha moment for me was when you mentioned about agentic AI, and it's an interesting era that we're living in, that the gap is talking about agentic AI versus use of spreadsheets, right?
Right.
So, and if agentic AI is really positioned to break those cross-functional silos, which I think is an awesome opportunity,
Yeah.
what gets in the way, technically, it just, again, is the people. People who do not want to change that mindset, the culture, which really stifles all this re-engineering work that we're talking about. Because look at us as HR. We did not figure out how to break the silos within our own functions. So I wonder from what you just said about how you articulate the business problems, not to run after solutions, but the business problems. How the evolution of the agentic AI can really crisply help us to present the opportunity that we have, so that the conversations about this work re-engineering and everything resonate more and really get, at an accelerated pace.
Did you guys hear that? Okay, so I think one of the discoveries we had last year when we were doing systemic HR is this idea of falling in love with the problem, not falling in love with the solution. So if you've seen our 4 levels of systemic HR, level 3 is falling in love with the solution. Level 4 is falling in love with the problem. Falling in love with the solution is saying, I've got this really good recruiting tool. Let's teach everybody how to use it because it's really good and it'll really make us more productive. Falling in love with the problem is, how come we can't fill this job for so-and-so in such and such a city? What is it that we could be doing differently to be more effective at this? And by the way, maybe this tool will help us, but maybe the tool's not even relevant to the problem. And so to me, the reason I think about this the reason I think about the multifunctional agent across the whole company, not just HR, is I'm thinking about the business problem of the company. And I talk to a lot of companies. You guys have this, really very complicated problem of building all these cars with all the demand changing and the laws changing. And so there's these big decisions that need to be made in the company that are cross-functional. If you're an HR business partner, I talked to a guy last night that worked at United Health Group, and they're having chaos in that company. You talk about a company that's kind of broken right now. And he told me the kind of things they run into in the Optum business unit at United Health Group with patient problems, payments not being made correctly, feedback from providers, all this stuff. Those are business problems. So you're sitting here maybe as an HR analyst or an IT person, and you're seeing this business problem, and what you're seeing is a multi-headed problem, right? All these problems have, there's a whole bunch of pieces here that have caused this. That's where we have to think about these agents, is can we think about this agent as a systemic solution to this bigger problem? I'll give you the thing that just hit me, in L&D, in HR, that, just really helped me convince me of this. So I was talking to this little company that we work with called Arist. They're a really cool little company, very small, but they're very, very successful. So they built this message-based learning system that you can learn on your phone, and it sends you messages, and it's really cool. And they use it for very, very high fidelity training. And the guy who started the company said, we got the system so well optimized that we can stick a research report in it, and it'll generate a course. Like a lot of our courses that come out on mobile, they're built on Arist. We take a big research report, we stick it in there, and 10 minutes later we have a course. And he goes, but the problem is, we can now do that, but the problem that our customers have is they don't have a document. They have a whole bunch of people who have a problem they want to solve, and we don't have the time to put it into a document. He said, so I'm going to add to our agent an interviewing tool that will interview these 30 people that want to help design this course, tape record their interview message, answers to questions, bring it in, analyze it with the LLM, and give the manager a list of topics that are going to be in the course. Let the training manager decide which one to pick, then generate the course. He said, so we did that. So they basically did performance consulting and training development. And this is something you might be interested in. And he goes, but then we launched the course, and we found out a whole bunch of people didn't take it. So we're going to build an AI that goes out and looks at where the course was launched and who took it and who didn't take it, and send emails to the people who didn't take it and tell them why they should take it based on what the people said at the beginning. Right? Isn't this brilliant? Because he was thinking about the whole problem. He wasn't thinking about the solution being, I've got this tool, how can I get more people to buy it? So, it's not that hard to lift your head out of the sand and do this, but we've never been allowed to in HR because we had roles that were siloed, we had tools that were siloed. So that's where I think this agentic stuff's going to go. And then the vendors have to be creative enough to see this. This guy is a Thiel scholar, so he's one of these really brilliant young engineering kind of guys. So he's just looking at this end to end, and he's just extending it further and further and further. That's to me where these agents are going to just have like 10x performance improvement in companies. And eventually they become autonomous because his system, the way he's designing it, is going to do almost everything. There's still going to be humans involved watching it, but it's going to do everything from needs analysis to content development to launch to distribution. Eventually he'll have an agent that will sort of ask people how they like the course, and it'll monitor whether they were successful in using the content, right? But he did that by thinking about it as a total solution. Another example that came to me when I was sort of learning about this was I was at the Workday. So Workday had this, sort of dysfunctional AI strategy that nobody could understand. And then they decided to rename it Illuminate. So everybody would understand it. Have you guys heard this? The Workday stuff? So they took all these AI projects and they said, we're just going to rename it Illuminate because we're a big AI company now. And everybody at the conference was kind of like, I think I know what you're talking about, but I'm not sure what this is. And so, in the middle of all of this communication, somebody at Workday said something that I thought was brilliant. He said, let's suppose you have a business unit in your company that's below target on profitability, and you want to know why. What would you do today? The CFO would call the head of that business unit and say, what the hell are you doing? Fix this problem. And then the head of that business unit would run around and blame a bunch of people and fire people and do something, right? And figure out what happened. He said, well, what we're going to do with Workday is we're going to look at all the data in your company and we're going to figure out what is contributing to profitability. And we're going to tell you that the reason that business unit is underperforming is because they're billing too much overtime and they've understaffed and they're spending too much money on labor. Now, he just made this up. But I'm listening to this, I'm thinking that is what AI is going to do. AI is, because the ERP systems never did that, right? So these are not kind of rocket science, PhD business ideas, but they're things we've never been able to do before because we built our whole companies into these silos. So that's kind of, where I think this is going. And I think for vendors like Microsoft, and you guys are such a sort of a forward-thinking company, the vendors that are really ahead of the curve are going to think about this in a much more holistic way, and they're going to build solutions that you're going to look at and say, wow, we can replace 10 of our old tools with this, even though it may not be perfect. The integration is so much more valuable than the functional expertise in each of those little areas. That's where I think this is going to go.
I think tech companies will definitely provide quote-unquote solutions, easy integrations, all of that. I mean, I cannot even enumerate how many agents we've created, and there are lots of people who are now like playing with them.
Right.
I think where the opportunity will lie as we bring it to the market is problem statement kind of
Right.
skills. Like, can you identify the problem that you're trying to solve so that agent could really address that problem?
I think you guys, if you look at it, you guys are doing all sorts of Copilot stuff. The Microsoft Dynamics Copilots are very sophisticated in their conception because they have the whole system. I think for the Office Copilot, it's a little trickier because you don't know what everybody's using it for. But I think that's where this is going. That's my kind of anticipation of why I think AI is going to be so fantastic for companies.
A question to you.
Yeah.
I'm Team Try lead talent management at New York Life. When we think about, as you were talking then, you gave the Workday example. If we think about Oracle, we think about SuccessFactors. Those are actually the tools that right now have the potential, like they have all the data and they have all the connectivity. Where do you see the future of those kind of
The big ERPs.
Yeah, like why wouldn't they try and solve this problem?
So I've worked with Oracle and SAP and Workday for a long, long time. So these are giant companies with huge stock valuations, and they do not want to upset the apple cart. They are very disincented to break what they have. So everything's going to be incremental. And they're going to chase after Mark Benioff. If Mark Benioff says agent, like this idea of digital workers, I mean, I don't call it that, but if digital workers becomes hot, they're going to say that. So they're unfortunately, they can't re-engineer everything they've had. They really can't. Right. That's why Workday exists, because PeopleSoft couldn't re-engineer what they had. So I do think, there are going to be some new companies that are going to disrupt those guys. I don't know who it is yet, but I look at like what these little guys like Arist are doing. Arist is going to disrupt the LMS market. Sana is going to disrupt the LMS market. We were just talking this morning, ChatGPT can you can do things with Galileo that you can't do in Eightfold, and Galileo is $39 and Eightfold is $1 million. So somebody's going to build some ERP-like stuff that's going to carve away at some of these big systems. I mean, the thing is, for large companies, they don't want to lose their ERP. It's this big workflow, machine, so it's not going to go away quickly. Yeah. So I think we've got to just sort of tolerate those systems and work around them.
Their problem is that it doesn't really matter the UI or the workflow per se. It's if it doesn't have data foundations, then that's your problem. Right. Like whether your Workday, SuccessFactors, or UI, it doesn't matter. It's all the same. But the actual fundamental, like critical infrastructure that we're going to require is actually understanding the data.
Right.
And I think that's
what they should be doing. Though. Like that, if they could
well, they're going to get thinner and thinner, and then there's going to be more stuff on top of it.
Yeah, they'll become like the
They're going to be like the mainframes in the banks that nobody ever looks at anymore.
Yeah, if you think about like from an experience perspective, your employees very soon are going to say they're going to have so much native like behaviors towards chatting to something that the next thing will be like a Microsoft Copilot on the front end will take that employee from pre-hire right through to retire.
Right.
Why shouldn't I just ask a chatbot like how many days annual leave have I got? It goes and calls Workday. How many like what's my path look like in the future? It'll go. That's exactly my point. Yeah.
Well, that's the reason that Workday created this system of record
Yeah,
thing,
'cause
because they're a
defensive
little
play.
worried about all these agents getting out of control.
Yeah, that's their only way of controlling
Right.
the AI space, right?
And it's not the first wave that the big ERPs and the big HR systems, I mean, the analytics piece, they kept trying and
Right.
trying, they could never solve it because they could never get out of their own way to be system agnostic.
Yeah.
So you need if it threatens their next sales of the recruiting module in Workday by offering something that's system agnostic, then they squash that immediately inside.
Yeah.
So there's a layer that has to be system agnostic on top, and whether it's Copilot that's connecting or Visio or one model on an analytics platform side, that's why they can never solve a system agnostic need.
Yeah.
It wasn't a question, it was more a complaint, actually.
I think
Do you have any influence to help her on here?
I've
Can you have a
learned.
word?
I'm just friends with all of them because they're not going away, you guys.
Yeah.
They're like part of the bedrock.
Yeah.
Can I just ask one more
Sure.
question? You connect with so many companies, you speak to so many CHROs, heads of talent. Who's doing this well, or is there anyone that you'd be like, hey, there's a few people who are doing this
Yeah,
well?
I mean, MasterCard's got a very dynamic company in business and organization and HR strategy. Spotify is doing this extremely well. I think the consulting firms do it reasonably well considering the business that they're in compared to what other companies do. ServiceNow is a very dynamic company. They operate well. I think Microsoft's some pretty amazing. You think about how big Microsoft, how amazingly dynamic that company is. There's a lot of cultural underpinnings there that have allowed Microsoft to adapt. And then I look at companies like Cisco. They can't get out of their own way. Or, I mean, I think IBM's a very dynamic company. They've really changed their talent practices, and they're a gigantic company too. So, yeah, I think we've got lots of examples of companies that are doing this really, really well.
If any of those heads of talent are here, please. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Brenda Swatak from IBM, and I work in HR transformation, and I work with the Harvard Business Line. And I wanted to ask you something you mentioned earlier about skills-based organizations. Could you just elaborate a little bit more on the role generative AI will play in taking us into that skill-based organization as roles become more fluid and cross-functional?
Yeah, I mean, it's actually pretty simple. If you have a project or a new role or a new customer situation or an opportunity to do some work, as Siobhan would say, forget about a job. Just say it's just work that needs to be done, and you'd like to find somebody who would be capable or interested in doing that. You can use AI to look at somebody's bio or background and find the right person, right? 10 times faster than you can by calling around, hey, do you know anybody who knows? Because then you're basically, dependent on who you know in the company. That's a very simple example that you can implement today, either in a talent marketplace or in a tool, like Galileo or even ChatGPT if you have access to the data. So that's a simple example.
I think I'm grounding it in like the skills, like tracking the skill of the person as opposed to like, as you mentioned earlier, like the higher job family, which is
I think there's, you guys correct me if I'm wrong. I think we maybe over-rotated on the number of skills and the number of tags and the number of words and the complexity of the data set around it. But the AI is powerful enough that it can deal with that complexity and make sense of it. I've seen this in our tool because in Galileo, which is basically ChatGPT with all sorts of data in it, we can ask it questions. Like I was just telling somebody, I put a bunch of resumes of people in there and I asked it to compare the skills of these people against it. It did it just exceedingly well because it's just looking at words. It has no bias. And so I think some of the manual effort we put into trying to tag and create skills libraries by hand, we don't have to do that anymore because the AI is figuring out that for us.
I just have a question around the true embrace, right, to get us to this AI agent, and that autonomy, right? Because I think there's a lot of companies that are like, cool AI tool, yes, let's do it, like let's put it in, right? So there is the investment coming behind it. But there's still a reluctance to really empower that, right, to its full extent and release some of the manual processes and kind of traditional structure that's been around it. So any kind of tidbits that you found to really push it over to the edge?
Well, I think for most companies, you focus on the biggest problem first. Focus on a problem that everybody agrees is worth working on, not some random idea that looks kind of cool and might be interesting. And like, for example, Allianz Insurance built a digital employee or a digital agent, or digital twin it's sometimes called, for claims processing. So I don't work in the insurance industry. I know some of you guys do, but I would imagine claims processing is very complex. There's lots of back and forth with the person, and you've got to look at documentation. You have to compare it to different cost systems to determine what's legitimate and what's legitimate. They just took all of that mess and they built an agent that could do it. And I don't know, in the IT, they did it themselves. Mm-hmm. And she told me that it's working great. They're already getting huge return on it. And I'm sure that problem was agreed upon as a big enough problem that the IT people and the HR people and the claims people would work on it. That's the way to get this stuff off the ground. Right now, because there's so many experiments going on in companies, there's probably 100 ideas.
Yeah.
And the IT people are probably trying to shut down most of them because they don't want, random stuff going on. So, for the next year or so, I think focus on a couple of really big projects will help, and then you get your feet wet and see how this stuff all works.
Yeah, that's what we're seeing. Like when we're closing customers really quickly, like a lot of HR folks don't get budget really in these markets. What we have found is we're selling big customers really quickly. And the reason is that the business case is directly linked to actually something that is not about HR. It's very focused on, is it productivity, velocity, a key CEO problem? And the thing with on that side of the business, what we're seeing is the leaders don't know how to solve it either, right? Like they're actually looking for solutions and they're super curious to do that. And I think a lot of where we're getting sign off is saying, well, if this is your big problem and you want this outcome, what are all the things that need to get done to achieve that? And that's where the task data becomes really important, because then that's like, well, how much value does this task have? If you've got a whole pile of folks getting paid $100,000 a year and they're spending 60% of this time on this task, that's where you're going to go. Like rather than spending, a little bit of time on something that's not valuable. And I think most of the business, we work a lot with the CFO now, the COO. We used to be very HR centric, but most of our buying group has now become like AI leaders, CFOs. But what we're doing is we're pulling HR in with us. We're like, guys, come on quickly. Like you got to get in on this, because if you're not in on this, they're going to go and do it to you. And I think here's the opportunity for all of us together to actually start looking at the business with the context of the CEO's lens and having that empathy to like, where is the most critical problem to solve?
I think productivity and operational efficiency are two big
Yep.
things to bank on
Yep.
In the current economy environment and with everything that's happening.
Yeah. And that necessarily, by the way, doesn't mean harvesting people out of jobs. Yeah. Most of the CEOs want to reallocate the money into something else. So if you can help, like if I'm a CEO, what I'm trying, there's a couple of exceptions. There's a couple of exceptions to the rule, but generally speaking, there's a little bit of that. But over time, as Josh was saying, there's this opportunity where it's not about harvesting humans out. It's actually like that supercharging, that superpowering. And it becomes like more an enabler to velocity.
I think there's a lot of work you have to do in prioritization here, because you can't do 100 things at once. And that's why there's like AI councils and steering committees in companies to make sure we're prioritizing our energies on a couple of big things as opposed to 100 little things.
You mentioned Allianz, and they, when robotic process automation was coming, I was at Allianz and went out to France, where one of the teams was doing this. And another piece of that story from that time, which I'm sure they've iterated since, was that this team of claims operations people, they were each responsible for working on their own problem and building their And so there was this massive empowerment of that team, and they were proud of basically agents. They weren't called agents at the time, because this is probably like 4 or 5 years ago. They were proud of what they had built to help them to research different documents and pull information forward. And they were always working on enhancing those things. So
So it took
hugely
time.
empowering.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they went through the same sort of idea.
Well, the
Yeah.
question is how you connect where there's commonality.
Well, this is
Yeah, sure.
the BYO AI is also going to be a problem, because if you tell all of your people, and this is what we're seeing this in Microsoft right now. Salesforce CEO, I'm a Salesforce backed company, right? So I can say this from just knowledge of like knowing that company. Their initiative is now build as many AIs as possible and win the war right now. Like it's a very aggressive pursuit. But if you think about actual how corporates work and how work gets done, there is like pipes where water flows and things have to go. And if you've got people going off and rewiring that and like sticking a nail in something and someone's over here, imagine the chaos. So I think like there is an element of, yes, we should encourage employees to amplify, but there needs to be a center approach, which is where you guys come in, where hold on a second, this is going to be your job title example of the manager going off and putting in a new job and position into the CRM. Imagine every person creating their own version of that process.
Well, that's why I did
It's a
that
nightmare.
chart, because I think you probably need to do a lot of experimentation so everybody sees what the opportunities are. And then somebody has to pull this together and say, all right, you guys, stop. We're going to put this into an integrated solution here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
agree.
But that'll happen. Yeah.
Have you seen any good examples? So in spirit of role modeling is always a good way to get things done in an organization. Have you seen examples of great people-based teams, talent-based teams that are doing what you described as the breaking down, and now you're not beholden to I'm a learning person, I'm a recruiting person, I'm a
Oh, we've got all sorts of examples of that.
doing it fabulously.
Well, just last night I was sitting at dinner with the CHRO of Dropbox, Melanie, I just forgot her last name, and she just, they redesigned their whole HR team around product management kind of methodology, problem solving, iterative, solutions, deployment, change management, feedback, and so forth. And so she said, we're only going to do 8 things. There's only 8 projects in HR now.
Yeah.
So she's consolidated a whole bunch of things into 8 initiatives.
We're actually going through the learning platform for that right now, where we're trying to move away from, here's a system and you have to have a system admin owning it, whether it's a talent management or recruiting system, or we're creating product teams. And we've had like, I think the same goal 4 times, where IT and HR are like, well, we need to build an org chart. No, forget about which team you're on.
Yeah.
You want to assign who's going to be dealing with product development, product management, and product ownership. Well, I'm an 18, I'm an 18. No.
Right.
Try to forget that.
Right.
And it took about 3 or 4 meetings, and we're finally making progress and segue, but it's really, you have to unlearn
Yeah.
a lot of like these lines that we have drawn in the sand.
Yeah.
We're making more headspace in like the data product side, but the actual like system product side, it's a journey.
Yeah. Another dimension to that, like just a left field point of view. So we work with one of the largest governments, 450,000 employees. They look after, the health sector, right? And they want to completely rethink, rather than talk about job, like they want to diagnose cancer, treat cancer, and then keep someone in remission. So they're looking at outcome-based thinking. And I was honestly it's one of those moments where it's so unexpected from where it's coming from. And their view was, we need to get to that fast and find a cost-effective way to solve these major outcome problems. And then they look at tasks. What are all the things that need to happen when you actually diagnose someone with cancer? What are all the things? And then they're looking at, and what is the worker that can do those tasks? And back to my example of like the new kind of workforce DNA, it kind of becomes you're bundling teams that are mixed with, your full-time employees, some contracting, you've got your folks that do the scans. None of them are full-time employees. They're typically, your anesthesists are typically contracted, right? And then you've got your digital workers as well. So it's this very far out thinking, but it's just something that, what we recommend with customers, like start from a blank canvas. Like get your team who are smart in the room and do day 0 thinking. Like if you were building your company from scratch, what would you do? Like what are the outcomes that you need? How would you design it? Like literally have that moment, because I think it's one of the most, like, impressive ways to challenge yourself where there's no stupid questions, no stupid answers, but then actually look at, well, now this is where you currently are and this is where your future could be. There's a whole pile of stuff in the middle. And even like, I mean, Josh, you're from WPP, you're how big?
115,000
Yeah,
employees.
massive organization, so many different brands, all kind of doing similar but very different things even in a copywriting.
Yeah.
And it becomes like understanding what do they do? And you know, Josh is leading a transformation, and you can explain a little bit more yourself, but how do you understand what is actually required at the business, and then what are these digital, blended human digital teams? And I think one of your stories probably like an incredible one to share with folks just on how you're thinking about it.
Yeah, I guess, so we're marketing services, right? So we're made up of advertising agencies, media agencies, PR agencies, production agencies who were all acquired as individual organizations. They're merged or not. No common systems, no common data. We've been on this journey for 5 years to implement Workday. We're still not there. It's a bit of a shit show. So what we're trying to do is start from the problems we're facing with our clients. One, they're coming to WPP more holistically, asking for integrated services. We want the best of WPP, regardless of what agency they're coming from. They're also in-housing, right? They're building agencies within their organizations and doing the marketing themselves, especially with AI. So we have an AI team building out client-facing and employee-facing products to help speed up the marketing workflow and to automate a lot of that. What Meredith and I are working on, partly with Siobhan and team, is figuring out how we continuously, as Josh has talked about, re-engineer individual roles based on these new workflows in order to solve those client problems that ultimately, in an ideal fashion, would support efficiency gains on the bottom, but also allow our people to spend more time on these higher value activities, whether they're a copywriter or a media planner or what have you. So it's definitely a journey. We started by trying to figure out, can we go into our agencies, looking at job families, and say, media planners. The CEO of Group M, media agency, said no human will touch our client's media plans by 2030. Okay, well we have 14,000 media planners. What the hell does that mean for their jobs? We're finding some interesting insights from breaking those roles apart and figuring out where we can automate and give those people better jobs rather than Excel spreadsheet-based jobs.
Of the 14,000 media planners, how many of them do the same thing? Are they all doing different things?
No, I mean there's
There's
different levels of them, but
okay, so that's
most
interesting.
they skew mid to junior. So probably 7,000 or 8,000 are doing the same exact job.
Okay.
Our business would argue that they all do different things.
Yes,
Right, right.
but it's the
Because
same as HRBPs. You all are
Exactly.
special snowflakes.
That's the reason they were hired in these individual
Yeah.
businesses,
Yeah.
they're not into some shared service group.
Yeah, exactly. And it's probably, if you ask all 7,000, they'll describe their job slightly differently, and they probably have slightly different workflows, even if they're
Right.
using common tools.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The problem we're having, and I assume some of you are facing this too, we don't have the change muscle inside to know what to do with the insights necessarily that Siobhan and team are helping to provide. So what we've done instead is, or in addition to in parallel, is find a client who is asking us to reinvent the relationship between client and
That's a good
WPP.
idea.
And so we're working right now with a large tech firm. One of our colleagues is out in the Valley running a workshop on how talent will change in that relationship. And we think, if we find some success there, we can then take that success internally and say, we told you so. Like, now you have to do it.
Yeah.
Because clients are asking for it, and they're going to start paying us for this work that we're doing with Siobhan. So
Yeah,
I don't
and
know.
it
it's
is
a journey.
the thing that you guys have got right, and I think one of the things that you've got
that
right,
makes sense.
and even at the Microsoft level, is it's not HR on their own. You're buddying up with the AI teams, and I think we've seen that with your team as well. Like you're not going to have the power to do this outside of your own swim lane, but the best thing to do is to actually go to that team and say, I can help you think about the best place to go. Because remember, these AI people have got a gun to their head, because if they spend the money in the wrong place and none of this AI is adopted, they look like a failure. So like there's also this, like, have empathy for where they're at, and you can actually help them solve that problem. And what we're seeing with customers is very much so that conversation around, they kind of go to where they know and we feel comfortable, which is typically software engineering and product management, because that's where they understand. But all of the opportunity in the gold mine of opportunity sits outside. So that becomes your role to navigate. The other thing I would just say, this is all new. So you're like, everybody is new in this space. So like, you're not going to get water through the pipes in every single customer and a whole pile of stories being talked about in market, because you're all on your journey at the same time. Some will be a little bit ahead, some will be in status quo, some will be like, we don't even know where to start. Exactly, but I think these forums become really important for you to all make friends and connect with each other individually, because you're going to be asked to solve this problem. And if you're not being asked, then you probably should question why you're not being asked to help solve this problem, right? Like, because that's a real thing that the business needs as well.
I mean, one other thing that we've done in partnership with Siobhan is we've kicked the door down into our AI team, and we've said, put us at the table.
Yeah.
Like, keep us informed of all of the shit that you're building, because we're just not going to naturally absorb it. We need to see it, and so we're feeding that into Reejig, so that when roles are spit out and we break down the tasks, we can say, you can automate X% of this task by using this specific functionality in this specific tool.
Yeah.
And that's going to blow the minds of
Yeah.
business leaders who need to pull the lever on the chain.
Yeah, and most customers have either about to or have bought Microsoft Copilot. So most enterprises are sitting with that product. And the thing with that product is it needs utilization, because it's expensive, and the business needs to see a return on investment on that. So it's like, we now make AI recommendation per task. So we're going to say that, here are your rules, here are the tasks that could be possible. By the way, you're already paying for this technology. Yeah. So like, actually utilize Copilot, and here's how the mini subtask is essentially a script on what you need to build in the agent. And most companies will go Copilot because it's the major infrastructure. There's a few exceptions. You guys, I think, are Google in terms of AI using in companies, or are you?
Google's the back end of our AI.
Yeah,
tools,
yeah. So there's some companies that do like a mix as well. But there's that's to think about, how do we prioritize where we do our implementation based on the investment the company has already made. Because you see your CIO, they're going to be under a lot of pressure to prove that this Copilot thing they've spent millions of dollars on is worth it. So that's like an opportunity for you folks to come to the table or kick the door down, like you folks did, in terms of like, hey, we can help you with this problem.
I mean,
we made an initial investment in OpenAI with the chatbot, completely tanked.
Yeah.
No one used it.
Yeah.
We actually just now double down on Copilot. And
Yeah.
so far, it's maybe day 3.
Yeah.
We're already seeing better experience than.
And it's the least mature it'll ever be.
Yeah.
This is the thing you got to realize. Like,
It's interesting. Last week, we found it to be a little bit ahead of now the curve compared to Gemini was a month ago.
yeah.
And it's also interesting that when I hear the term
They know we can hear you.
Copilot, we always say Copilot as if it's one product. Copilot is actually, at the moment, 30 plus different products.
Yeah.
There are 30 plus different Copilots depending on the use cases. And the number is just going to double down, especially with that shift towards agentic AI. So, but I totally agree with you that without really thinking through, yes, we're bringing all this technology into our ecosystem, how do we think about the work redesign,
Yeah.
re-engineering, whatever we want to call it? I think it's super important. Otherwise, I just don't see, or I cannot see how we can connect the people and work and demonstrate the outcome-based results.
Yeah. Another example we see is folks just buying products. Someone sells a really good product, and then they go, oh yeah, they promised that they would reduce all of our sales cost by 80%. Isn't that amazing? Like, everyone go. But the biggest blocker is if you don't have the infrastructure in your company, in the data, to your point, if there's not that good, clean data, none of those things are going to work. And again, it becomes like prioritize your energy on the things that you already have that have already some level of adoption, because there's no change management expertise in the businesses right now for this. It's all kind of jump off the cliff while building it vibes right now. Even in the consulting space, like, you know, they're all learning as well. I think half the consultants haven't even logged in to and built a Copilot or built an agent. The ones I'm talking to, I can find out really quickly, do you know what you're talking about, just by asking a couple of key questions. And it's more like philosophical visioning, but it's the reality is you guys got to implement this stuff, right?
I have a question. Maybe you've thought about it at GXO with your 3-day implementation, or at Microsoft where you have 30 different tools. One thing we're really struggling with, and you probably have a perspective on this, is how we capture value realization.
Yep.
How do we measure talent value, financial value,
Yep.
productivity value, when we don't really have a baseline, right? So maybe it will take 10 years.
No,
for
it's
us
like,
to-
we're going to automate a bunch of tasks that actually aren't that valuable to
Yeah.
us.
But even if
So
they
why
are-
did we just
even if they
bother
are
doing it?
valuable,
Right,
knowing the value increase, we haven't figured out how to do it.
It's really hard. The only way that you can
But
solve
if
that.
you're focusing, what's the name of this job title? Media
Media
analyst?
planning, media planners.
I think you could probably, I wouldn't know exactly the business model, but I think you could figure out the value of the media planner in the revenue. Like if you did a sort of a,
Yeah,
what is
salary
their
by net
relative,
sales or something.
no, what is their relative value to your clients relative to other services you provide? To put a sort of a business case around why we're re-engineering this job.
Yep.
That's what I would try to do.
One of the things we embarked on is actually creating about what's the true value of HR, and not saying like this is the cost for the system, but includes it, and this is the cost of HR, but it's also how much is the manager's time spent on the interview process? How much is the employee's time spent applying and going through certain steps? Now, we started very top down. We're going high level, and we've come up with a measure to look at every milestone of the employee's life cycle, from I apply to all the way to I retire, and we've come up with an actual an amount of benchmark we can use for every step of the process, and we're going to be using that as part of our AI journey and our AI strategy. So, and again, it doesn't go to like how do we bring costs down, like direct costs, but how do we bring out, unlock that value, maybe instead of a manager spending 10 hours a week on performance management or succession planning or whatever it is, are they now spending less time in the future?
Sounds like a
We've
cost
done
reduction.
this.
So you have costs by either phase of the journey or moments that matter.
Yeah, moments that matter, exactly.
Yeah.
We've done it through the whole process.
Yeah, it is tricky though. No, go ahead.
I think one of the other interesting things that I've been grappling with is kind of trying not to just also focus so heavily on the question of cost, because I do think time is an incredible factor, and right now that's the conversation that's happening a lot about AI is like, what time is it saving? What time is it
Right.
reducing? What time is it maybe expanding? But there's all these other dimensions that I'm also kind of grappling with. How do you quantify these? Which is increased quality,
Yep.
increased consistency. That doesn't always translate as a time factor
Yeah.
or a dollar factor, but it does translate into something which will then impact a dollar factor.
Well, that's a good point. Like in your case, it could be that you want to reduce the cost of the media role or the impact of the
Increase
media role.
effectiveness.
Because I'll bet there's some media buyers that are 10 times better than others, media planners, whatever they're called. And those clients are paying you 100 times more money. But so what is it that they're doing that the other guys aren't doing?
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
you're absolutely right. I actually think the cost reduction one isn't going to be as good as the value.
No, velocity.
I think
Velocity.
the cost reduction one's going to get you into trouble, because that one's going to get you into trouble.
But our
You can only go so far. At some
Right.
point, you only have 24 hours in a day,
Yeah.
Right.
7 days a week. So my concern is
We'll
if
fill
you
that time.
anchor, if you anchor on time, at some point you're running out of baseline. You're running
Right.
out of opportunity. You're running out of understanding where the impact is, because everybody's hit. We can't invent more days in the year. We can't, expand the universe. So we can ride that, time savings, that cost savings wave for a while, and then we're going to have another answer
Yeah.
about where we're bringing impact.
Right.
I mean, velocity. It has to be about velocity. Velocity is like less cost. It's more, think about the banks. The banks want to get to their customers faster, and you will win a customer by your customer service. When a bank is kind of the same, you win by that. So like the banks that we're working with, a big bank in the APAC region, and they came to us and said, this is not about people, this is about how do we speed our people up so that they get to customer faster. In healthcare, it's about velocity to customer. The impact moment is actually speed to treat, speed to triage. Like even in your world, it's a velocity around manufacturing and, the records build, the condoms and and all of the formula and all of those things. It's like speeding that whole thing up.
I actually think the way we sold it better within HR was not to talk about the time, because we will fill the time, right? We will find things. So we're not going to say, oh, you're going to have all these hours back in the day, because no, we're just going to shift to what we're doing. So we actually really pissed off our HR people, like when we had a lovely consultant come in and be like, hey, we're going to do a time study analysis. It's like, no one cares, right? Because that doesn't feel meaningful to them. So I think not talking about it is really important so that you actually have that velocity piece on it. I think the other piece that has worked well for us is that scalability, right? So find that one client or customer that wants to buy in and wants to do it, and then we look at it, right? Because we're in like 86 countries around the world. So to be able to say, okay, we're going to pilot it in 5 markets to see how that goes, because change management is not a great skill set in most organizations. You find your own like change champions and advocates along the way, which really helps to tell that story. And then people are kind of like, oh, maybe they are onto something. Maybe I do want to get involved, versus the resistance that you have of like, don't come talk to me. Like, I know my job, I can do it.
Yeah, and the brand manager in Durex is a very different brand manager in Lysol. But same job, but different, there's slight nuances to the localization of those tasks and that work breakdown. So it's really interesting that like you can have an 80% of a role can be the same, but you have to allow for that local context, whether it's in country context or because some people do things different in New Zealand than they do in New York versus Japan. And it's like in your world, we're working in Japan with you, and we're working in headquarters, and we see similar things but very different. There's this piece that's going to be really important for organizations when you start to think about transformation at scale. Like get a couple of like runs on the board, become like a thought leader in the business, become the change agent, but then realize that once you've got one part of it done, you're going to have to think a little bit differently to get that
Can I go back to the business
view.
case thing again? I've been through enough of these that I think a cost reduction business case is going to blow up in your face. It's going to feel good the first year, and then nobody's going to care anymore. Here's an example. So you guys know who Paradox is?
Yeah.
So Paradox is the most successful AI company I've ever met, because they've built such a great system for AI-based recruiting that they don't even sell it with a price. They actually go to the company and they look at the cost they're spending on recruiting and the value proposition of recruiting people faster, and they build a business case first, and then they price their product around the business case. So the latest example of this, the CEO of Chipotle was on Jack, what's the guy's name? It's the NBC guy. Kramer, saying, we sold 30% more burritos last quarter because we hired people this much faster. So every penny we spent on AI just paid for itself. That's what you got to look for. These media guys, if they can do 10 times better media planning for your clients, you're going to get all the money you need. And forget about the rest of the projects. All the money's going to go into this, and then you can replicate around. If you say we're going to reduce the number of media planners, people are going to be like, okay, well, that's okay, but what are our clients going to think? And you see where I'm going? That's what AI is going to do. It's going to add scale. I really think that's...
Scale and innovation. I think
and growth opportunities.
In value realization, it's very hard to measure the innovation, but when you are untapping that kind of capacity, that is converting into potential, innovation, etc. So this is at least what we've defined as our value realization metrics, because when we are repurposing the time that our software engineers or product managers spending by virtue of being equipped with all these tools, we're starting to track whether we see new products coming up. We're starting to see, so this is your innovation.
Speed results in innovation,
I think there's I just bought the book, I haven't read it. I think this visual is inside it because I had a conversation with Matt Bean. He wrote the skill code, and there's I
have so much to say.
So there's this whole kind of like XY chart on productivity/value impact and skills diminishment or skills acquisition. The thing that I think we haven't talked about today is how does the AI going into the media planner make for media planners who just don't know how to do that job very well anymore because AI has taken over. So how do you implement and not basically dumb down the capability? So there's a piece of being able to interact with AI and be effective there, but also the core underlying principles of media buying and planning can't, if they get lost in the process, what does that look like? So the skills diminishment is something that I'm curious about, and it's interesting. So you made a thought about
We
this.
invited actually him to our HRLT conversation just because we were interested in that kind of concept. And he brings two things, right? One is what you've just described. How don't we dumb down, all the work to the point that you don't have a way to build the foundational skills, and then impact on the learning culture. So basically, you are in some way unintentionally creating a situation that your novices do not get the opportunity to go through the learning road with their experts. So I think that it's an interesting concept. We absolutely need to be intentional about how we redesign work. Yes, there is some research that even says the more we start using ChatGPT in universities, they start seeing decline in the writing skills of the students. That being said, I think it's really about intentionality, like thinking about your work design less through the lens of we can automate everything, but really thinking more through the lens of what tasks, even if they are automatable, we want to have human and sort of bot in kind of collaboration as opposed to that. So I think it's about intentionality rather than just trusting fully, quote unquote, work ontology that gives you the outlook of tasks that will be automated.
Give you a really microcosm example. So in my learning, so we're using an internal AI tool that just kind of supports everything that you can do. And one of the things we've done in some of our learning programs is not just say, okay, just learn the tool. We actually have like a day journey where you start the morning having to do the task yourself without it. And so you go through this like day-long journey. And you end the day with these that's also, okay, sure, are they day one? These are folks that are like day one into our organization. So are they going to go on the journey that I went on, which is I spent 5 years doing that, and no, sure. However, there's, to your point of intentionality, there's an intentional micro-learning journey in there that allows them to touch on certain aspects. And you could argue that's not going to solve everything, but it is a way of thinking about that augmentation versus, well, I just want you to use the tool. I don't want them to just use the tool. Right?
One of the things, I'll wrap up in a second, but one of the things back to what you said from the HRLT conversation, we looked at then the work intelligence informing bench strength. So it's like, it's not just about taking out rules, what are the right tasks to actually go after? And it's based on cost, pain, velocity, opportunity, and bench strength. Because you need to enable, like for exactly your point, like how do people get skilled up? Think of the graduates coming to work during COVID with no direction, all working from home. They couldn't function. I'm so sorry that our time is coming to an end. This has been hopefully incredible for you. Josh, we are so grateful for you to have come and been with us and kind of really bringing this conversation to life. Thank you. This is such a new topic. So this is new. As you'll know, Josh is floating around, which means he's interested in understanding more of your problems, understanding the space. So like this kind of open conversation is exactly where we need to take it. We are at the start of this journey. I do believe this is our moment. I am an ex-HR person, so I don't think there has ever been a more important time for what we're doing. I think we all need to take that moment as an opportunity to think about how you can build this new super worker organization and really start to think about, not just thinking about skill or job architecture, but thinking about this dynamic workforce. What does that look like? Where are you at on your journey? We've printed up a couple of key moments from Josh's research, which I think you'll find really helpful. And then we kind of give some commentary about like how we will take you on that journey of kind of going through there and using some real data. Feel free to scribble on notes on this. We'll also, if folks want to get connected with each other, we'll be doing more of these, but we can also get you connected. So please do reach out if I can make introductions to any of you. But again, thank you, and thank you to you all, and hope you all have an amazing day and feel like you're walking into the AI team's office today when you get into work. That is your one task.
Thank you.